All right, everybody. Good morning and welcome to your digital field trip today. My name is Jake and I'm joining you live from the California State Railroad Museum. I'm here with Summer. She's an environmental scientist and a guide here at the Railroad Museum. And that's going to become important here in just a minute as we talk about the environment in the railroad. Before we begin with our game here today and discussing what we're going to be talking about for most of the program, while we wait for everyone to join us, there is one thing I really want to let you know about, and that's called the Adventure Pass. That is a pass for fourth graders and their families. And I know we have a whole bunch of fourth graders on the call here this morning. And it gets fourth graders and their families into a total of 54 state parks entirely for free. And that includes us here at the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento, California. So if you're in the Sacramento area, your local class joining us here today, I really encourage you to think about the Adventure Pass, especially if you're a fourth grader. Tell your parents about it. It's really easy to sign up if you're very local to us. You can just join us here at the Railroad Museum. Just come on in. We'll help you get signed up. If you are not local to Sacramento, so you probably can't visit us, there's 53 other state parks in this program. So there's definitely one near you as well. Yeah, you'll be able to get signed up. Oh, 1 second. It looks like our camera turned off. That's not great. 1 second. And our camera was just a little extra tired this morning, I guess. All right. So now that most of us are here, we can go ahead and get started with our program today. This is a program called Pollution and Profits. It's an environment-based train game here at the California State Railroad Museum. We're located in Old Sacramento State Historic Park. I'm sitting in the Transcontinental Railroad Gallery. If you were here in person, this is the first place you would go after getting in through the lobby. This is where you would come and you'd learn all about the Transcontinental Railroad. In today's program, we're going to be having a game where we ask you to put yourselves in the shoes of a railroad baron, a CEO, a business person that was in charge of the railroad all the way back in the 1900s. And we're going to put you into some hypotheticals. You're going to make some tough choices here today. And we're going to see if you would make the same decisions that people in the past actually made. And we're going to see who makes the best decisions, who comes out with the most total points. And I'm going to flip the camera around so you can see our scoreboard real quick to help explain our scoring system here. All right, so it's, so that's our scoring system. You see on, it's my left, I think it's your right. You'll see the environment score. It's currently at 100. You can see all the pretty pictures of the animals and the mountains and the beaches, all that good stuff. Everyone's starting out with 100 environment points because we haven't done anything to the environment yet, which means it is perfect, it is fine. And so you get 100 points. But if you notice on the other side, we have a big 0. We have no money points. So we're all broke right now, unfortunately. But I think throughout our program today, we're going to end up making some decisions that might give us a little bit of money. And so that's awesome. But some of the decisions you're making might end up taking away environment points. It may make you lots of money, but it may hurt the environment a little bit. And so your job here today is to make those decisions and see who can have the biggest, highest score overall. And so some of you might decide to make sure that the environment score stays as high as possible, guarantee that you keep as many of those 100 points as possible. And some of you might decide, I will leave those environment points. I will end up with 0. That's okay with me because I'm going to try to have as much money points as possible. And some of you will end up somewhere in the middle. I think that's where most of us will end up. All right, but your goal at the end of this is to have the most total points possible. Here today, I'm going to be giving you those scenarios. Your environmental scientist right here, your consultant, is going to be recommending an option, but you're free to take whatever option you want. She's going to lock in an answer for the whole group. And you have 2 goals here today. Your first goal, you're going to want to beat Summer's score. So you're going to want to end up with more points than our consultant here today. And your second goal is to end up with the most points out of everybody on the call here today. And so we'll see who that is at the end. So we have a bunch of people joining us from a bunch of different styles here today. We have some people joining us on individual devices. You're watching us on a laptop or some type of device, and you have access to the Q&A and all that wonderful stuff. If that sounds like you, I would recommend having an individual score. Make your choices individually. We'll help you keep score along the way. And I think that will be your best option for you. If you don't have an individual device, that's okay. If you're watching this on one big projector, that's awesome. That's a great way to join us as well. I would recommend having one big class score. You can do whichever one you think will work best, but that's typically what we've seen work best in the past. We'll give you a little bit of time while Summer's being your consultant, giving you some pros and cons, things like that. We'll give you time to be able to do a poll or whatever you need to do in the class, raise in hands, things like that, in order to come up with that overall score. All right. If you kind of understand what we're doing, that's a good start. I think it will make more sense as we go along. There's a lot to kind of keep track with there. But we're going to jump into our first scenario here today. So you guys are all railroad CEOs, you're all railroad barons, and we're going to see if you make some decisions that get you some money or protect the environment. All right. Scenario one, you are the CEO of the Central Pacific, and you need to find a way to connect Sacramento to the East Coast. There are so many people on the East Coast that really want to come to California. You've heard of things like the gold rush. You've heard of other reasons why people want to get from the East to the West Coast, but there's no railroad connecting it quite yet. And you have a friend named Theodore Judah, and he's created a map that suggests that you can go through the Sierra Nevada mountain range. So that's places like Lake Tahoe, Donner Lake, all of that in order to make this railroad. And so the decision in front of you is if you want to go forward with that. Do you want to build the nation's first transcontinental railroad, taking the travel across the United States from 4 to 6 months all the way down to 7 days and 7 nights? And so we're going to give it to your consultant, and we'll see what she picks.
All right, so let's consult this scenario here. So I think if we build through the Sierra Nevada mountain range, we are going to have to break through the rock that's there, the strong granite rock, because trains, they can't go up and over the mountains. They can't go around them. We have to go through them. So we have to break through that solid granite rock with explosives and star drills and sledgehammers. But I don't know if that would be very good for the environment. We got to think about things like that. We are, destroying the natural environment. Oop, camera turned off again. Like it's very tired. But yeah, as I was saying, we're gonna have to destroy the natural environment. But I'm just gonna keep talking. We want this railroad to happen. We need this railroad to happen to travel faster and connect the East and the West Coast together. So I think what I'm going to do, my decision, I think I'm going to lock it in. I got my trusty sledgehammer here. I'm locking it in that, yes, number one, we are going to build through the Sierra Nevadas.
All right, everybody, that's very exciting. So we have decided for our consultant score to go ahead and build that railroad. I'm not sure what you guys picked out there, but we'll find out at the end. But for this response here, so your company now stands to make a lot of money from the Transcontinental Railroad. Now that people and goods can move across the country in as little as 7 days in 7 nights instead of 4 to 6 months, people are willing to give you a lot of money for that journey. And so you'll get paid a lot for that. Obviously, unfortunately, there's some environmental impacts that go with that as well. So I'm going to flip the camera around and we're going to go ahead and change our environment score and our money score a little bit here. All right. So this is mirrored, so it may look a little bit off, but we're going to go ahead and add 30 money points. So that's pretty exciting. You guys are going to end up with some money there. But unfortunately, we are going to also lose 10 environment points. And so that's a pretty big impact on us over there. All right. Ooh. The money's flying everywhere. Oh my goodness. All right. And if you did not decide to build it, that's okay too, but you're going to end up With 0 environment score difference, that's great. Instead of -10 for building the railroad, you're going to keep even, but you do not gain those 30 points, unfortunately.
Now, I kind of want to talk about some of these environmental impacts that will happen if we do, we are going to build through. I have made the decision. I've locked it in. We are going to build through the Sierra Nevadas, but that does come with some major environmental impacts. And two of the more important ones are going to be habitat destruction and loss of biodiversity. Up in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, it is a beautiful place and the biodiversity is so large. That means there's so many different species of plants and animals, and we are destroying their home. So a lot of habitats, animals' homes, they're going to be gone, and we're going to drive those species away from their homes. And we're going to lose that biodiversity. Another thing is contamination of soil and water. So from those explosions and all those chemicals, we are going to, sorry about that, you guys. We are going to contaminate the nearby soil and the water system, so streams, rivers, lakes, with all of those chemicals and the runoff from the explosions. So that's kind of sad.
All right, everybody. So you've heard about some of those impacts. I think the camera's going to turn off again. I think we're just going to go with the slightly less fancy camera, but the camera that's not going to turn off a whole lot. So let's go ahead and just use this other wonderful camera. It's pretty good too. Its lighting is just a little bit worse, so we won't look as good, but that's all right, because you guys will at least be able to see us. So you heard about the environment impacts. We're going to be showing you some of the money you're going to make as well, though. And so if you heard that, we now have some money in our bowl here. I'm going to actually add 3 handfuls because we made 30 money score. All right, we are now ready to go ahead and go with our second scenario. So as you make progress, you're still a CEO of the Central Pacific. You are now making progress going towards the East Coast during construction, but you realize the Sierra Nevada mountain range gets a lot of snow every year. It is a very snowy place. In fact, if you have ever been to Lake Tahoe, Donner Lake, places like that, there's a good chance that you've even seen that. But one of the problems is trains can't always go through heavy snowstorms, and they definitely can't without something called a snow shed. A snow shed is exactly what it sounds like. It's a shed that shields your train from snow. It basically looks like a gigantic barn. That's actually what they used to call it, the largest barnyard in the world. And you're going to need a lot of those in order to get your trains safely through the Sierra Nevadas in the winter. But there might be a problem because all those snow sheds during this time period are made from wood. And so the decision in front of you, some people say that you should just not have the trains go through the Sierra Nevadas in the winter because that's a lot of wood. That's a lot of trees that we're going to have to cut down. And some other people say, well, people are still going to want to come to California even during the winter months. We're still going to want to be able to get people from California to other places, even in the winter months. Think about if you had moved from the east to the west coast in the middle of the summer. That's awesome. Maybe you love it here in California, but it's getting close to Christmas time. Maybe you want to head back or Thanksgiving. Maybe you want to head back to the East Coast to spend it with your families. So I'm going to turn it over to your consultant, and we're going to see which she picks.
All right. So if we do build these snow sheds, we are not going to stop the production of trains going from the east to the west to the east, and that will make us a lot of money, people. So this is hard, but also, cutting down trees, destroying habitats and the forests. We also got to think about that too. This is tricky, but I'm locking in my answer. I'm going to have to go with yes, we are going to build those snow sheds in the Sierra Nevadas.
All right, you heard it, everybody. We are going to go ahead and build those snow sheds. We are going to continue to have that transcontinental railroad even during the winter months. There is certainly some positives and negatives from this decision. So by deciding to keep that, we're going to get some money points, but as you heard, we're going to lose some environment points. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the microphone back to our consultant while I go ahead and add your score up. But what we're going to do is we're going to give 10 points for the money, and we're going to lose 10 points again for the environment. So it ends up being neutral, but depending on what you like better, the money and the environment, it could still come out on top. If you decide that you don't want to do this, you're going to end up with 0 money, and you're going to lose 0 environment points. So if you voted yes to building the snow sheds, you're getting 10 money and losing 10 environment points. If you voted no, you're getting 0 of both as well. All right, I'm going to go on.
All right. So as Jake is putting up the money, I just want to talk about, what we are doing to the environment as we are building these snow sheds in the Sierra Nevadas. As we are cutting down the lumber to use for the snow sheds, it would result in deforestation. I don't know if anyone's heard of that before, but, it just depletes the forest. We're getting rid of the forests. And it would be on a very large scale because the Sierra Nevadas is so vast and we're building straight through the Sierra Nevadas. So we need a lot of lumber to build those snow sheds and big enough for a train to fit through. So these are very, very big. As Jake said, the longest barns. Yeah, and we would also contribute to extreme weather conditions. Trees, they absorb CO2 from the air. And as we are cutting those trees down, we are releasing the CO2 back in the air, back in the atmosphere, which is bad for the environment. It causes wildfires, hotter, drier summers, and crazier winters. We get more snow.
All right, everybody. So you heard some of the pros and cons there. If you, since we decided as a consultant group here to go ahead and build the snow sheds, I'm going to give us another handful of money here in our gold coins. And so we are now starting to fill up our, I don't know what that is, a basket, our bowl here. All right. So we are now on to scenario 3 here today. So I want you to think of yourselves as now Union Pacific CEOs. They were a railroad company that helped build the Transcontinental Railroad. But instead of starting right here in Sacramento, they started over in Omaha, Nebraska, and they built out towards the west. And so it's a little bit different, but same time period here today. And so now you're a Union Pacific CEO, and one of the big things they had to deal with, they didn't have to deal with the big Sierra Nevada mountains necessarily, but they did have to deal with putting down a lot of track next to dry grass. And dry grass is something that can catch on fire very fast. And so some of your consultants, some people say that you should just build the railroad as fast as possible. You want to make sure that maybe you keep the environment as close to what it was as possible. And so you're just going to leave the dry grass right there, but put down the railroad tracks as fast as possible and get out of there. Try to make it to Promontory as fast as possible to make as much money as possible. Some other people think that that could be a fire hazard. Dry grass, that sounds kind of dangerous. And so they say that maybe we need to cut away the dry grass, change the environment a little bit to make sure that everything is safe. And so we're going to hand it over to your consultant and see what she picks.
All right, so now we're switching. So we're on the East Coast. Dry grass. I think that'll slow down the construction of the railroad, which might be costly to our money points, but we would be helping the environment by cutting back that grass. So, I have been hurting the environment a little bit with my past 2 decisions. I'm gonna lock it in. And we are going to cut back the grass.
Right, we're cutting back the grass. Interesting decision. So we've decided as our group here today to cut across the grass. Maybe you made the same decision, maybe you made a slightly different one. But your decision to cut away at the grass makes a big difference. we may think of cutting away at the grass as, well, we're changing the environment. So maybe that's bad. But by putting a train there, we're already changing the environment a little bit. And by cutting away at the grass, we reduce the chance of fire there. And so because we're not going to start a fire, it's going to be a lot safer. We're actually going to gain money points. And because we helped prevent a fire, we're also going to gain back some of our environment points. And so this was a really good decision from your consultant here today. We'll see if that's what you picked out there. If you decided the opposite, if you decided to leave the grass the way it is, I understand why you would pick that. That makes a lot of sense. We've been talking about changing the environment, and usually that's a bad thing. But for that, you're going to lose 5 money points, and you're going to lose 5 environment points. And so I'm going to go ahead and add up those points, and I'll hand it back to the consultant.
Yeah, so it's a bit tricky when we made this decision because, you know, as Jake said, some people think that altering or changing the environment is just automatically bad. But there are other factors that come into play. If, you know, if there's dry grass right by the railroad tracks and those trains are holding coal, hot oil, we are more susceptible to starting those wildfires, which would really, really hurt the environment. So, you know, it's really, really hard to make this decision because it does slow down our construction, but I think I made a pretty good decision. I don't know about you guys.
All right, our consultant score is adding up here pretty well. So we will see who ends up winning this game here today. All right, we are now on to our next scenario here. Okay. On our next scenario here, we are going to be talking about completing the Transcontinental Railroad. So now the Transcontinental Railroad is all finished. How awesome is that? Now people can move across the country in as little as 7 days and 7 nights. And since you guys decided to build it, so many people are paying you guys. Oh, I forgot to give us more coins. 1 second. All right, a few more coins for our bucket here. All right. But now the Transcontinental Railroad is done. You guys are making so much money as CEOs of the Transcontinental Railroad. And we're going to fast forward just a little while down to the 1880s and 90s and maybe even the beginning of the 1900s. And so we're trying to figure out how to get more people to ride this railroad. It's still very successful, but you can always make a little bit more money. And so we're going to try to do that. One thing that people are starting to notice is that more and more upper class rich Americans, more and more of them are deciding to go on lots of vacations. And one of the places they really like to go on vacation is Europe. They like to see the sights, some of the historic places back in Europe. And some of your consultants think that there might be a way to convince those people, instead of going to Europe, to visit places in the United States. And so visiting somewhere still in the United States and maybe taking a train to get there. And so we are going to decide on whether or not we want to start a marketing campaign inviting these people that are going on vacations anyways, inviting them to come take a train and visit some of the great outdoor spaces in the United States. What do you think?
All right. So I think this is a good marketing plan if we do agree to do this, but we are also encouraging people to go out in the United States and explore the environment. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing if we get people out to the environment. What do you guys think? Give you guys a little bit of time. We let them go on the lands. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? I think I'm gonna lock in my answer. I think I'm going to say no. We are not going to market on the trains.
Ooh, an interesting decision. And so your consultant here today decided that she is not going to endorse the plan to go ahead and market these vacations to different spots in the United States by the train. And I understand why you might want to pick that, right? So getting people into outdoor spaces, maybe that's going to lead to more littering, pollution, things like that. And so that's interesting to think about. But unfortunately, this is one of the ones where you could have gained money points and gained environment points because this helped lead to the national park system. And so Summer can explain that a little bit more as I'm going to go add the points here today. But if you decided to not do this marketing campaign, it's not that bad. You're just going to lose, or you're just going to lose about 5 environment points, and you're not going to make any money from it. But if you decided to do the opposite, you decided to go forward with that marketing campaign, you're going to go ahead and gain 10 money points and 10 environment points. And so that's pretty awesome. You're gaining environment points and you're gaining money for that one. And so I'm going to go update our score, and then I'll be back in a second.
Well, whoever said yes to the marketing is doing great. I predict. But yeah, I think that there are pros and cons to marketing for people to get out in the environment. You know, there are some people who litter and, you know, kind of destroy the environment that way, but also it is good to get people out into you know, our natural resources, our parks, national parks, state parks. And like at state parks, our mission is to protect and preserve our natural resources. So it is good to get people out to our parks and to let them know why it is important that we should protect and preserve and nurture our outside resources and our natural resources. So good for you guys who said yes to marketing.
Unfortunately, we were out of one, so I put -9, so I guess we ended up saving a point on it. So that's not too bad. But yes, that is why we added 9 there instead of the 10 originally. All right, we're going to flash forward one more time. This is our final scenario. And so this is your last chance to earn points here today before we find out who won our game here. So we're going to flash forward all the way down to the 1860s original railroad. And then we talked a little bit in our last scenario about the late 1800s, early 1900s. And now we're going forward. Now we're 100 years from where we started. This change in time, there's a big technology. There are now cars all over the place, and that's not so great for us as railroad barons. There's no longer as many people trying to use trains to get across the country. The road lines of the past are not. And so unfortunately, we're not making as much money from that. But we have been approached by a nonprofit organization, a company that does work without necessarily making money from it. They're called Rails to Trails. And their goal is to create wonderful outdoor spaces, almost like you heard about in the last scenario with. And they are offering to essentially take those tracks off your hand. You no longer have to worry about maintenance for them, but they're going to turn those railroad tracks basically for free. You might get a little bit of money, but they're basically going to take them off your hands for free, and they're going to turn them into wonderful trails for people to enjoy. And so is that a good idea? What do you think?
So, you know, if we're not using these tracks anymore, I think it might be beneficial to hand these tracks over so that, you know, people could go out into our lands and explore. But then we would be tracks them away for free. How do I go about this? If we aren't gaining money, maybe a little bit, but you know, we might be losing money. I'm not too sure, but we would be helping the environment. So I'm going to lock in my answer. And I am going to say yes to giving our tracks to Rails to Trails.
Awesome. All right. So our consultant has made a wonderful decision. This is going to be a choice that gets us a little teeny tiny bit of money, but also helps the environment. That's really exciting for us here today. If you decided to, like we did here today, to go ahead and donate or slightly sell, but essentially these are for free, tracks, we're going to give you a whole like I said, not that much, but a little bit. But we're also going to help the environment a little bit. And so we're going to add 5 points to the environment for that. So that's awesome. That helps offset some of the times in which we've lost points throughout this program. So what does that mean if you selected no, you wanted to keep those tracks? It's not that big of a deal. Like I said, this isn't really a money thing, so there's not going to be much of an effect there. You're going to end up with 0 added. And you didn't help the environment points for that either. So just keep your score 0-0 for that. So I'm going to go ahead and update, and then I'm going to add up our points because that was our last scenario. We're going to see what our consultant score is. And what I invite you to do is also add up your score and then put it in the Q&A if you have an individual device. If you're doing one big class score, see if your teacher, whoever has the computer there for you, if they can put your class score in there. And we're going to see how many of you beat our consultant here today. And we're going to see who maybe has the highest score out of everybody on the call.
All right. Oh, you guys get one last look at my decision making and my scoring. We will see who got a better score than I did. I think I hurt the environment just a little bit too much for my liking, but we did gain some points at the end. So rails to trails. I think that unused space that we're just keeping, I think is very, very beneficial to the environment for people to go out and hike and do outdoor activities, which is always good for the environment and always good for your mental health too. Just getting outside and being in the fresh air. Yeah, I'm going to give you time. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to give you guys time to add up your points and put them in the Q&A so that we can see if, I am the champion or if I had someone beat me. We shall see what is going on. Add up those points.
So for our consultant score, it's not the prettiest. I also think it's reverse for you, so it might be a little bit hard to keep track, but that's all right. I'll help you out. So we started with 0 money. That wasn't great. So Summer made some great decisions, and we ended up with 30, 40 total money points. That is pretty awesome. Over here, it's a slightly different story, but it's all right. We started with 100, we minus 10, so we're at 90, minus another 10, we are at 80, minus another 5, we are at 75. We're going to add 5 to that real quick, so we're back to 80, and then we're minusing 9, and so we're at 71. And so 71 plus 47 is a grand total of, you're the scientist. You can. All right, we shouldn't have to do calculating here, but we will, just because we want to make sure that our results are accurate. We don't accidentally add any points that we don't deserve here today. And so we end up with 118 points for the consultant. I think that is pretty good, but I bet somebody out there beat our score. We're going to have to scroll down because there are so many people talking to us, and that's awesome. Thank you all for your messages. There we go. I got a couple 117s, 155 from Latricia. That's awesome. We got another 137. Awesome. 167, that is so good. 176, that might be the highest I've seen so far. 157, that is awesome. All right, let's see, those scores keep coming in. 199, oh my gosh, that's definitely our highest score so far. Congratulations. 200, all right, that's one more, that's awesome. All right, So as you see here today, the main thing we want you guys to understand is that the decisions that you made today might be a little bit different from what people in the past made. But the present we have today is based on those actions of the past. And so our decisions today in the present will help in the same way that the decisions of the past make the present, our decisions here in the present make the future. And so as you see, you guys make a whole bunch of different decisions throughout your program. You guys ended with a whole bunch of points, and that's really awesome. And as you go about your day to day and going forward, I hope you think about the decisions that you are making and how they impact both the environment and other things in the world as well. I do want to talk about one specific type of decision that you can make that will help the environment. And you've probably heard of it before. It's called recycling. I bet we've all heard of that. It's a thing that we see all the time with those wonderful blue bins inviting us to put our reusable recycling material in it, things like that. But what we may be a little less familiar with is the campaign of reduce, reuse, recycle. And so recycling is a part of it, but it is not the only part. And so I want to break that down a little bit because it's actually in order of how good it is for the environment. And so it is the best option when you have the ability to reduce the amount you're using. And so I used to have a prop of a water bottle, plastic water bottle, but it's gone missing. But either way, when you think of something like a plastic water bottle, one of the best things you can do is reduce the amount of those you need. And that isn't reducing the amount of water we drink, because water really is wonderful and it helps make us healthy. But maybe using a reusable water bottle instead, something that we can use again and again and again, and reducing the amount of those single that aren't very good for the environment. And so that's not use those reusable or those single use rather water bottles, and you use the reusable as much as possible. But sometimes, like I know I have a reusable water bottle, but sometimes I forget it. I actually forget it quite a bit, unfortunately. And so often I will be in a situation where I do need to use a single use water bottle. And that's okay, that happens. But then the second best is to find a way to reuse it again. And sometimes with those single use ones, you don't want to actually use it for waters. Sometimes you don't want to do that. But you can use it for things like arts and crafts. You can look up on Google. There's a whole bunch of different arts and crafts you can use basically just using that water bottle. And that helps the things out a little bit. For us, we've been using the same reusable water bottle, or single-use water bottle that we'll reuse again and again for a program like. And so that's another way that sometimes you can find those single-use water bottles. And then last but not least, if you're in a situation where maybe you have a bunch of those single-use water bottles just laying around, you can't find a way to reuse them, your third best option is to go ahead and recycle those. And that's a wonderful thing. If you're able to do that, that definitely helps things out as well. And so remember, reduce, reuse, and then recycling as a last resort there. All right. I think we might have a little bit of time for some questions in the Q&A. I might answer a couple. I know we had one as you guys go ahead and load in some of those questions. We had some questions about this wonderful locomotive right here. And this is the Governor Stanford locomotive. It has a big number 1 because it was the first one for the Central Pacific. Remember, that was the railroad company that you were all in charge of for the first 2 scenarios in our program today. And so its claim to fame, one of the best things about it is it was actually used for the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. And so we were talking about building those giant snow sheds. This locomotive would be in charge of bringing in some of that equipment, the lumber, all that stuff to build those snow sheds. And so this is the oldest one that we have inside the museum. If you come here in person, you'll definitely be able to see that. It's one of my favorite, and it's a pretty wonderful one. All right, let's see if we can get maybe 1 or 2 more questions here, if the Q&A will open for me. That doesn't seem to be wanting to load. Let's give it 1 more second. There we go. Before we head on out. All right, so we got some questions asking about trains today. So we pretty much throughout this program, we've mostly learned about the detrimental impacts, the bad impacts of train travel is an inherent. Maybe it's better to be driving a car, maybe it's better to be flying in an airplane than to take a locomotive, a train here. And that might even be true for a locomotive like this, depending on how it's loaded and things like that. But our modern trains are actually pretty good in net for the environment, especially if you live somewhere like New York City, or if you have some other the electric trains that we have out in the world here today. And so if you're deciding to take a train trip, it isn't necessarily bad for the environment. In fact, in general, it is better to take a train than any other form of transportation, with just two exceptions. First exception is going to be walking. That has basically no impact on the environment, right? And the second one is riding a bike. So same kind of thing. If you ride a bike or walk, that's better for the environment. But otherwise, trains are a pretty good deal. All right. And we got one more question asking about this guy over here. And because we talked about snow sheds, I do want to talk about him for just a moment. He was in charge of construction for the Transcontinental Railroad. Not actually him, he's a mannequin. But based on, and so the snow sheds let people know how to build it, kind of in charge of the construction in general over there. All right, well, I want to thank you all so much for joining us here today. We had a lot of fun. I hope you all did as well.